Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I'll be your host for today's presentation. Thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners webinar. Today's webinar is, do you have these essential asset management capabilities? And it sounds like we have definitely struck a chord out there because we're going to have a full house today. There are so many people joining this presentation today that we're going to max out our license. So it's exciting. And we're very happy to have Ivanti's very own Eric Pedersen to deliver for us. Eric is an experienced senior sales engineer, and Eric has a security, IT asset management, and IT service management background. He has worked for Ivanti for 12 years and Heat for 5 years prior to joining Ivanti in 2005. He was an implementation consultant for 8 years, implementing Ivanti solutions before joining the sales team. Helped to design the first ITAM solution, which was the precursor to Asset Manager. And we're going to get a chance to see Asset Manager today. He's going to show a little bit about that. Before we get started, Eric, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. We were founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space. We took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces, all using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to help reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Ongoing remote administration and support services offerings will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. Feel free to reach out to Flycast Partners at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Or you can simply visit our website at www.flycastpartners.com. And you'll notice there's a chat box on our website where you can chat with our IT specialist Monday through Friday during normal business hours. This is just one of many weekly webinars that we host here at Flycast Partners. I encourage you to poke around on our website for data sheets and white papers and different types of training that we offer. And feel free to reach out to us as well at info@flycastpartners.com. Now, Eric, I'm about to turn this over to you, but, folks, as we get started, I want you to type all your questions in the Q&A section of this WebEx, and I'll read them off to Eric at the appropriate times. We'll try and get through as many questions as we possibly can today before our time is up. So I want to thank all of you for attending. We've got folks from all over Canada. California is very well represented. A lot of folks in California out west, even some Hawaii, ton of people in the East Coast. What a packed house we're going to have today. Eric, I'm going to give you the controls and let you get this show started.
Great.
I have passed them to you, sir.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, well, definitely welcome to everyone to this presentation. We're going to kind of take you through the IT asset management landscape a little bit, cover some of the products very quickly through this PowerPoint presentation, and then actually go into a live demo of both our hardware, really hardware and software lifecycle management product, which is Asset Manager. And then for those software people out there, we will also take a look at License Optimizer, which is our software license management tool, both for client side as well as software management, license management within the data center. As Rich said, my name is Eric Pedersen. I am a senior sales engineer with Ivanti. Again, been with Ivanti for about 12 years, and I do have experience across our product portfolio as well as experience from an ITAM perspective also. So the first thing I kind of want to take you through is kind of the current state of IT asset management. And just like IT service management over the years has continued to grow, we're definitely seeing IT asset management kind of do the same thing, right? It's definitely becoming much more top of mind. especially in today's climate, from a financial perspective, from a security perspective, all those different types of things. So some of the things that you can kind of see here, 25% of organizations still use tracking spreadsheets. In fact, just in the last week, I've talked to one or two organizations that the majority of their assets were still tracked within from a spreadsheet perspective, whether that's hardware, whether that's software, or different types of assets. A lot of assets are missing or can't be found, and that's really a huge security risk, right? If you don't know where your assets are, especially if we're talking about data that resides on those assets, huge risk that you're encountering there. So absolutely imperative that you keep track of those assets. You know where they are at different points in their life cycle and those types of things. Of course, 56% of organizations verify asset locations once a year, and I mean many of them don't do it at all, right? And then of course there's a small percentage that do it every 5 years. Definitely huge issue there that especially if you donate equipment, things of that nature, you want to make sure that it's properly disposed of, and we're able to track that type of activity as well. Especially if we ever get audited, you would have that audit trail to be able to show what exactly happened to that specific asset, and of course the data that resides on it. Some organizations spend 10 hours a week resolving data accuracy issues. Especially that becomes very prevalent, especially when you have data that resides, across assets or across your landscape in spreadsheets and different databases and other applications and those types of things. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute as well. And then, of course, 66% of IT managers have an incomplete record of their IT assets. And I'd almost say it might even be greater than that. I mean, I definitely run into a lot of IT managers, IT asset management individuals, C-levels that really do not have a good insight into the state of their IT assets. All right, so some of the typical IT asset challenges organizations face today, there's obviously a lot of them. Visibility and performance is a big one. You can't manage assets you don't know you have, right? I like to think about this one and actually give you a quick example of this. I talked to a client of ours, I don't know, a couple years ago that had basically had a breach. They had an attacker get into their network, and it actually happened as a result of a vulnerability in a piece of software in their data center that they weren't even aware that they had installed. So that just gives you, one example of a good reason why you need to know not only where your assets are at, who has them, but also from a software perspective, what is actually being installed, and of course being able to control that as a piece of that as well. But obviously, just knowing what people have installed in the environment and what vulnerabilities are out there is big as well. And the other thing is lifecycle management. A lot of organizations, or a lot of people don't really think about the life cycle of an asset, and it's definitely something that is becoming much more top of mind and much more important from that perspective. Because again, you want to know who has the asset, who's responsible for it, where is it at, how many times has it changed hands, all those different types of things. Have we properly disposed of it? Those type of activities as well. So obviously we want to track the hardware assets throughout their life cycle, right? And then of course the big one, compliance. Whether that's from a hardware perspective, that could be from a software perspective, from that compliance perspective, especially if you're dealing with things like HIPAA and things of that nature. You want to make sure you're following the correct procedures and you have those procedures in place. And then obviously from a software perspective, you want to make sure you're not under licensed and things of that nature. So helping to manage software audits before they become an issue, huge ROI right here. I don't know if you've seen some of the fines individuals have had to pay, or even just true ups. It can get extremely expensive. So being able to take care of that beforehand can definitely save a tremendous amount of money, and obviously lower the total cost of ownership. Of course, optimization. You want to be able to control spend and optimize your assets, both from a hardware perspective as well as a software perspective, right? You want to make sure you're applying the correct licenses to the correct software. You're not using a higher level license for, where a lower level or a less expensive license might suffice. Obviously, tracking things like depreciation of hardware assets and those types of things, making sure you're not buying licenses you don't need or buying hardware that you may not necessarily need because you're not tracking warranty dates and that type of thing. Of course, security, I've talked about that already a little bit, but that's a big one for me. Definitely reducing security issues within the business is huge, and we can certainly help with that from a asset management perspective. And of course, risk management ties into all of that. Reduce financial and reputational risk. Obviously, risk comes in when you're talking about compliance with security, all those different types of things. Being able to manage that risk and mitigate it is extremely important from that perspective. Okay. So asset manager, some of the product capabilities. Again, this is around our lifecycle management product. And again, that can be hardware. It can be software as well. Typically, when we talk about software, we're tracking the software that's installed on a particular device, maybe the usage data, how many times someone has launched it as well. And then, of course, all the hardware type data. And it's not just, when I say hardware, it's not just servers, routers, switches. It could be IP phones. It could be a desk. Right, so it's those assets that you want to actively track and make sure that you have an eye on within the environment from that perspective. Obviously, product catalog, being able to have users request hardware and software through a service catalog is definitely something that's very important. Stock management, someone orders a piece of hardware or software. Obviously, you want to make sure you have the capability to take it out of storage if if you currently have something that we have stock management process, we have that within the system as well, so we're able to help you with that. So you're not buying hardware or software that you don't necessarily need to purchase because you've already got it, right? You've already got licenses available, or you already have stock within a certain location that you can actually assign out, check in or check out. Of course, contract linking, hardware and software, maintenance contracts. Of course, that's some of the things we're able to do as well. Procurement tracking, we can bring in purchase order information, which will show invoicing, those types of procurement information as well. Of course, we can help you with the total cost of ownership and get that lowered. We can do vendor management as well. And then, of course, the big one, barcode scanning, is part of that. And all this kind of ties together. So, you order a piece of hardware, you track it through its entire life cycle. That includes barcode scanning it when it hits the dock. You change the status from on order to receive, then maybe it gets assigned out or it goes into stock. From that point, maybe you assign it out to an individual, you set the location. All these things can happen through the entire life cycle. And of course, maybe you'll be tracking warranty information on a piece of hardware. And then, at some point you would decommission it or end of life it if it's software, or dispose of it. And you want to make sure you track that data throughout that entire life cycle of that asset. And that's really what it's all about, is tracking the entire life cycle and having that history available should you need it. So really right now in the current landscape, we have data all over the place. We have different types of data sources that you're dealing with. You have, applications that you may or may not be aware of in the environment. You've got things like virtualization, where you've got, all these clients on these different types of hosts, these different types of virtualization technologies. You've got data in different HR repositories, could be Workday, could be, Active Directory, SAP. Maybe you have purchase order information in SAP that you want to bring in or track. And then, of course, all your different vendors, right, where all this information is coming from. Not only do we do discovery, obviously, where we discover devices in the environment, we can pull in that type of information, like memory and attached monitors and BIOS information. But we also want to know what PO, what purchase order is this tied to? What individual is this assigned to? What applications are on here? So we want to tie all this together in one solution. So you're seeing and you're getting all this data together in one central location, one database of truth, so to speak. And that's kind of where we really come in. So what we're going to do now is kind of take you into the solution itself and how we kind of do that with our different ITAM solutions. There's not too many more slides here. We'll actually get into the demo here in just a minute. But I do want to kind of take you through kind of our list of solutions here. So the Ivanti IT Asset Management portfolio, obviously we have Asset Manager. We have a License Optimizer for clients and a License Optimizer for servers. So when we talk about License Optimizer, that's really the software license management. Obviously, we'll have some hardware information there as well. because that's an integral part of being able to make sure that we are accurately reconciling your licenses with the software that you own in your license management. And a lot of times, especially in the data center, there's a lot of complex rules. How many CPUs do you have? Well, then you would need this license, or how many processors, etc. So we definitely need to take that into account. And then, of course, from a hardware side, that's where you have the asset manager. So we bring those two together for a total asset management suite. And that's kind of what you'll see on this next slide here. So ITAM really makes up the hardware asset management and the software asset management. We bring those together to really give you a full solution from that perspective, to give you a very, very good handle across your estate, your asset management estate. So you know what hardware you have, where it's at, what the warranty dates are, when they're coming up, which contracts are tied to which assets. You know your effective license position. You know if you're either over licensed or under licensed, which can both obviously save you a lot of money, right? You don't want to be spending money for licenses you don't need, and likewise, you want to make sure you're compliant, especially if you ever get audited, because that can be an extremely large fine. Okay. Oops. Make sure. There we go. Okay. So we have a couple different products. When we talk about Asset Manager, there's Asset Manager Essentials, which is really a kind of out-of-the-box solution on-prem that you would stand up. Really nothing, no customization that you'd be doing. It's really leveraging what is currently within the solution, which is pretty extensive from that perspective. You also have the capability to do what we call Asset Manager Cloud, or another on-prem version that does allow you to do workflow management. So you can change workflows. When certain actions take place, those types of things. You can change forms. So there's a lot more customization within that product, obviously, but it really kind of depends on your needs from that perspective. Okay, here's just some screenshots. Like I said, we are going to go through this through a little demo, but you can see some of the things we can do within Asset Manager Essentials. Of course, asset details, the repositories, asset management database, contract information, vendor information, financial data, procurement data, stock levels, locations, barcoding, all that different type of stuff is available. And again, you'll actually see this live when we take you through the demo here in just a little bit. Okay, we've got just a little Advocate Healthcare case study. If you guys are interested, we can get you more information on that. Advocate is a very, very large customer of ours in the healthcare sector that leverages, obviously, our asset management solution as well as many of our other solutions as well. But definitely a very good case study there. If you guys are interested, we can certainly get you access to that from that perspective. And then for my last slide, real quick, these are some of the questions that come up, and obviously we're going to be answering many more questions that you guys may have, but let me just kind of take you through a couple of these real quick, and then we'll actually get on with the demo. The first one, does Ivanti's asset management solution manage hardware and software? I think you guys can probably answer that already yourselves. We certainly do. Obviously, Asset Manager is our kind of our life cycle tool where we manage hardware as well as other types of assets as well. But really, it's a hardware asset management lifecycle tool. So we track the entire lifecycle of that asset from the point one of your users or whoever else is putting in an order all the way through to the time of disposal. And we'll bring in data from different vendors like CDW or Insight or whoever you're getting this from, Dell, Microsoft. We'll pull in information that may be existing within other databases, maybe other spreadsheets. We bring that data in and we're able to aggregate it and tie it all together so you have that insight. And again, of course, we also do the software side where we'll do discovery. We'll find out where software is installed, the hardware information, how many processors it has, hosts to clients, databases, all that different type of stuff. And then we do those reconciliations for you from that perspective. So we definitely do both sides of the equation there. Does Ivanti's Asset Management Solution connect to the CDW customer portal? Absolutely. We do that to make it much easier to import that information from those vendors that you may be purchasing licenses from, hardware, etc. So we certainly want to make it as easy as possible to import that data into your asset management system, which of course would be the Ivanti Management Solution. Does Ivanti's Asset Management Solution have your customer model their software licenses and futures? Absolutely. We do trending, which you'll see in the short demo I'll do on License Optimizer, but we can look at future needs. We can look at your current license position, where you may have some issues that you may need to address, those types of things as well. So absolutely, we are able to help you model both current software licenses to give you your effective license position, as well as future needs and those types of things. And then, of course, who do I speak to at Customers at Asset Management? Typically, what we'll do is we'll want to talk to asset managers, maybe IT managers, even from an IT service management perspective, those types of individuals as well. And then, of course, anybody that's really interested in optimizing and managing your asset management environment from that perspective. One thing I didn't mention is we do have the capability now, if you are an IT service management user of Ivanti's, we actually integrate now. So it's one portal both for IT service management as well as asset manager. So you have that integrated view. You go to one console, one web portal, I guess I would say, to tie all that information together. So now you've got the operational side, which you get from the CMDB, right, as well as that financial side. So you can tie those two pieces together. So you can still create a change request for a specific server. Obviously, that resides in the CMDB. You can, if you need to look up financial information, that's going to be in the same area. It's really kind of bringing those two pieces together to really integrate those solutions and giving you one single pane of glass from that perspective. And that's about it for the presentation, Rich. Did you want me to answer any questions before we get into the demo?
So far we don't have any questions yet, Eric, but I'm sure that once you get in the product it themselves, I'm sure there'll be questions. There usually are when we have product demonstrations. So let's keep moving forward. And folks, don't forget, in the Q&A section, type in your question. I'll read them off to Eric, and he'll answer as many questions as our time will allow today.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and log into Asset Manager first. Obviously, I told you there were two different solutions. One from a hardware lifecycle perspective, and then, of course, the license optimizer, which is really on the software side. Now, don't get me wrong. You can track software within Asset Manager. Obviously, that's going to be more from a end-of-life perspective, what's installed where, that type of thing from that perspective. When we get into License Optimizer, that's really going to be around your effective license position and making sure that you are in compliance, you're not overspending and that type of thing. And we'll actually take a look at that here in a minute. From a hardware perspective, though, what we do, obviously this may look very familiar to you, especially if you are a Ivanti Service Management customer. This is the same interface that you would see. Obviously, here we're in as an asset administrator, so I'm actually seeing a different view. And this is really around the asset state that you're going to see. So obviously, you've got things like contracts, we've got desktops, servers, laptops, assets by financial owner. Lots of different data that you can actually store on dashboards to really give you a insight kind of overall into kind of what's happening by aggregating that data from that perspective. So a lot of these things you can actually dive in to any of these areas, these different types of queries. I'm actually going to pull up one specific asset here so I can kind of talk through some of the pertinent details that you get through this process. As part of Asset Manager, so say you're like, you know what, we want to start tracking our assets. How do we get the data in there? Well, as I said, there's many different ways that we can ingest data. One is through discovery. So we can either use existing discovery data. So if you have, an Ivanti product like Endpoint Manager, or if you have, SCCM or some other product that is actually doing your discovery in your inventory, we can ingest that data and tie it back to your assets based on like an asset tag or something of that nature. That's how we kind of bring all these disparate data sources together, such as purchase order information, invoicing, all that information within one central repository. So what you're seeing here, obviously, is some information around a Dell PowerEdge server, right? So we've got, the asset subtype, the model, signed part number, things of that nature, as well as things like the status. Is it assigned? Is it awaiting disposal? Is it disposed? Is it in stock, repair? Lots of different options here that you have. So, say someone puts in a request for a piece of hardware, the status would automatically be set to on order. When it comes in and they scan it, as soon as they scan it in, that would change to received. At that point, maybe you want to assign a user, right? or maybe you want to assign a location. So you can take certain actions as well through this process to be able to, assign it out or change locations or any of those types of things from that perspective. And again, we're using that back end workflow management tool that you would see in the Ivanti Service Manager as well to do a lot of these actions. Lots of things on here as well: warranty expiration, warranty starts, the terms, purchase dates, barcodes, even RFID. If you want to utilize that, you certainly can. So this is really kind of a good view of kind of the types of information that we would pull in. But again, depending on which solution you go with, obviously if you go with Asset Manager Cloud or the on-prem version, you would be able to actually modify these forms and that type of stuff. If you don't necessarily need to go that route, there's Asset Manager Essentials, which is really more out of the box. Let me actually go over to this.
And Eric, we have a couple of questions. We have a couple of questions if you want to answer those as we go forward. All right. So Adrian, his question is, can we be successful at AM without the AM SW? Current customer with other modules: config manager, discovery analyst, and license manager and service manager.
So you currently have service manager and then those other modules, and you said FW. I'm not sure if I understand what FW.
SW.
Oh, so yeah, maybe I'm a little confused there. So you're leveraging. So I guess the question is, you currently are leveraging Ivanti Service Manager with some other modules, and you want to be able to track assets from that perspective without necessarily going with the full asset management solution.
Okay, so what he's saying, yep, he agrees. He just said yes. You hit the name. That's what he's talking about.
Okay, yeah, to some extent, absolutely. So you can certainly. Obviously, if you're going to have a CMDB, right? So some of this information you're already going to have. If you want to get the full utilization out of it, I mean, you certainly, to some extent, you could be successful without purchasing the entire asset management solution. But then a lot of that stuff's going to have to be built. So you're not able to leverage a lot of the best practices and those types of things that have gone into actually creating Asset Manager. But could you do some of it? Absolutely. Does that answer the question?
Okay, the next question comes from Chantel. And Chantel, is there any possible integration of that tool with a tool like Jira? And Adrian says yes, thank you. You answered his question, by the way.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, absolutely. So Jira obviously is a lot of individuals use it for QA. They use it for service tests, that type of stuff. So we have APIs available not only to be able to write or to for you to pull information in, but we can also write back to Jira through APIs and that type of stuff. So yeah, through our APIs, through our import functionality, absolutely, we can do many different types of integrations from that perspective. So I guess one integration I might think of is, you put a ticket in if that's what you're using for IT service management, and maybe you want to, change a status within, Asset Manager when someone requests a piece of software. That type of stuff is absolutely available to be able to do. Are we good there?
It looks like we're good, and we don't have any questions for right now. Folks, if you have any additional questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section, and I'll ask them for you for Eric.
Awesome. All right. So some of the other cool things you can do here, right, is you can have assigned values. This could either be put in manually, or you could have it come in through some type of an import. And then we can also look at the discovered values, right? So obviously we can do discovery both from a network perspective, where we're doing queries through SNMP, those types of network queries. We do inventory, obviously, to pull in certain information around memory and all those things I had talked about previously, hard drive space, networking information. So we can pull that data in, and we can kind of compare it to what we have for assigned values and then what we're actually finding from either imports or from that discovery process. And then we can kind of match those types of things up and make sure there's parity there. Again, if you guys were interested, obviously, if you have a endpoint management tool and you're already doing inventory, we can leverage that existing tool. You wouldn't need necessarily our discovery tool, which is actually sold separately as part of this. So we can either give you a discovery tool to pull in this information, or again, we can leverage your existing tools and leverage that existing data. And then what you'll see is things like this, from this perspective: CPUs, speed, architecture, OS information, IP, MAC address from a networking perspective, storage. So this is really all the stuff that I kind of had talked about from an inventory perspective that we pull in, typically through some type of an agent. But it can also be, very useful. And a lot of times, this information, if you are not using, an asset management solution, a lot of times you'll also bring this information into a CMDB, especially because it can be very useful for a tech. If they're, logging a ticket, they want to know, hey, what's the last time it rebooted, or how much memory does it have, or what's the what version of OS are they currently on? So, this is how we kind of tie that information in and kind of integrate between those two different disciplines, IT service management and IT asset management. But definitely is very important on both sides of the aisle, whether you're looking at it from an operational perspective or from a financial perspective too, because maybe we look at a machine and we're like, what, this guy has hardly any memory. We need to go ahead and order some additional memory. What's that cost? Those types of things. So it gives you insight across both sides of it. Another thing I like to look at, installed software, and one thing I'm going to bring up here. I like to look at this: installed on, usage frequency, last used. That can become very important. So obviously you're going to see what's installed on a particular machine, right? Maybe from a licensing perspective, and you can do some license management within here. Obviously you can see, do you have enough licenses, that type of thing. But when you start looking at usage frequency, okay, why are we purchasing a license, or why does this individual have, I don't know, Microsoft Project, right? They haven't launched it in a year. So you can take that data, and again, you can aggregate this data and show it on a dashboard, but you can use that to make decisions around, what? He hasn't launched this in a year. Let's go ahead and send an uninstall command out, get that off his machine, and let's deploy it to someone else. That way we don't have to buy another license. So we're saving money there by leveraging the data that you currently have. And again, we can leverage this type of data if you're currently pulling it from some other type of system, or we have a discovery tool as well that will be able to give you that information also. So either way, we have the capability to obviously provide that type of discovery tool and inventory tool, or leverage the existing tools you might have within your environment today. All right, so just some of the other.
And Eric, we have a question.
Yep.
We have a question from Alan. Alan wants to know, we have SCCM and BMC footprints, help desk only. Would it be possible to have one of these products sit in the middle to integrate the SCCM data into footprints?
So typically footprints, I would think you would want to, and I guess it depends on what you mean by integrate, but typically you should be able to import SCCM data directly into footprints. But if you wanted to still be able to track the asset lifecycle, sure, you could take that SCCM data, bring it into Asset Manager. Asset Manager would obviously take it through its lifecycle. And then if you wanted to, for whatever reason, take that data then and bring it into footprints, so you can tie it to an incident or tie it to a change or whatever it may be, or a problem, you could certainly do that, absolutely. So it's not necessarily a middleware, but you could certainly do that in that case. Does that make sense from that explanation?
It looks like they're understanding, so I guess we can go on.
Okay, awesome. All right. So obviously some of the other things you're able to see here, you may have contracts linked to a specific asset, whether that's a server, software, those types of things, maintenance agreements. You're able to view that type of information. And again, just another example of the ability to assign locations, financial owner, if you need to check it in or check it out, especially if you're dealing with a stock, stock process, stock management, you can do those types of things as well. Let me actually back up here. So many different things you're able to do from that perspective. Let's see. I got lost there for a sec. So we'll go back to our original screen here. Obviously, relationships, that can become important. Obviously, if you have things that may be affected, from a change perspective, or if an asset goes down, you can set up different types of relationships. Financial information, obviously you can track from that perspective. We talked about this a little bit, right? depreciation. You can track purchase price, freight costs, when you purchased it, how it was acquired, ownership types, and that actually brings up one other thing I actually wanted to touch on as well. But again, lots of different options you have available to be able to track all types of details around an asset. One thing I didn't mention, this I like as well, is knowing what the environment is. Is it production? Is it test? Is it development? That can become very important as well, especially as we start talking about things like change management and those types of things from that perspective. So I just want to make sure you guys were aware of that as well. And of course, you can see some of the other types of data we track here as well: use policy, sensitivity, security risk, regulatory risk, and those types of things. Another thing, attachments, right? This one, obviously, we have an owner's manual, but maybe you need to attach a disposal certificate when you dispose of a piece of hardware that has a hard drive, or a copier even, right? We've seen in recent years where copiers actually store a lot of sensitive data in memory. So as you get rid of these types of assets, you want to make sure, obviously, that you have a record of what actually occurred with that asset. Especially if you're donating it or you're taking it to a recycler or something of that nature, you certainly want to have that the capability to say, hey, here's what happened. We followed the correct procedures to degauss the drives or properly dispose of them, or however you're doing that. So another thing, obviously, is the attachment piece of that from that perspective. Something else that I think is pretty cool: stock management, the ability to kind of see what you currently have available to loan out. So you can look at different stock within certain different locations. So I can open up North America and see what we have from that perspective. We've got 2 laptops available. They're currently both in stock. You could assign it to a location, assign to a user. You could transfer it to another location here. So just many, many different ways to move through that life cycle of that specific asset, again, to include stock management. And again, I like to think of this as a purchasing person that needs to say, you know what, do we have available stock to give this individual a laptop or, a desktop, something of that nature, a mobile phone. And if we don't, then we need to order, right? But if we do, then we can transfer that stock to that individual, assign it to them, assign it to a location. And then, 6 months from now, you need to find out where that asset resides. Well, you can come in here and you'll know exactly who it was assigned to, right? So you have that insight into where that asset is located. And if obviously that person doesn't have it, then you'll know the last place it resided, and you can actually follow up and hopefully determine where that asset has gone off to. Of course, we had talked about purchase orders. This is another piece of it. This information, let me actually change this here. This information, again, is brought in automatically, typically through an import, right? It could be from Dell. Here we've got CDW. It could be from many other types of vendors. We can pull that information in, and then we tie it back to the specific asset, so you always know from that perspective what asset it was tied to, what's the current disposition, those types of things. And then, of course, along with that, invoices, which again are tied typically to a purchase order, right? You have that financial information there, current status. Especially if it needs to go through some type of approval process, you have that information within the system as well. And again, it follows the same type of workflow that you would have within IT Service Management or Ivanti Service Manager from that perspective. And again, this data is stored within a SQL database. So I know a lot of you have asked, can we integrate? Can we, do different things with this data? Absolutely. I mean, it's really just, it's stored in a database structure that you can either query, you can import information from another system into it. You can take this data and access it, and either through an API or by querying the database, those types of things. So all this data really is just residing in a SQL database. There's no special tool you need like you would need typically for like an SAP or something to access the data. It's really available to you should you need it, whether that's bringing it into Jira, or bringing Jira information back into Asset Manager, or whether it's moving it into footprints, et cetera. That data is certainly available, and there are avenues to either bring data in or exfiltrate data out should you need to leverage it in other applications. Okay. And then, of course, we also have some tools available as well. We have our automation tools that can help facilitate that. If you guys are interested in kind of in learning more about our automation and some of the integrations we have, there's actually the marketplace for Ivanti. That's I think it's marketplace.ivanti.com. If you're interested, great place to look for some of the different integration types of integration tools that people have built using our solutions. Great place to take a look at if you get a chance. But just another example of kind of how we're building that integration story across our different solutions, and in particular IT service management and asset management. That's really kind of a short overview of Asset Manager from that perspective. Do we have any more questions on that before we dive into the software side of it?
Nope, no questions right now.
All right, excellent. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and log into our License Optimizer. Again, this is a tool which allows you to really get an effective license position, so especially from a compliance perspective, but also being able to do things like look at trending, make sure you're not overspending on licenses, all those different types of things. And we do this both from a data center perspective as well as a client perspective. So if you're not necessarily interested in the client side of it, you just want to track license usage, make sure you're compliant, make sure you're not purchasing too many licenses, those types of things. You can certainly do that on the client side, but if you're more interested on making sure you're compliant from a data center perspective, or even both, you can do both those things within the License Optimizer tool. And again, this is the two pieces together really make up the ITAM suite. Doesn't mean you need to buy both of them. If you were interested in one or the other, you can certainly do that. But certainly, license management is huge these days, especially from a risk perspective, a financial perspective, those types of things. And again, it's not just making sure you're not going to get audited and have a giant fine, but it's also, what am I spending on my licenses today? Do we have end of life coming up? Do we have, specific versions that are going end of life? Are we applying our licenses correctly? And again, it works very similar. Although one thing I will mention, this is a cloud-based product, so this is not on-prem. This would be a cloud-based product. But we take that data, again, we take that discovery data that you have. So I know someone had mentioned they had SCCM. We can take that inventory and discovery data that SCCM provides in terms of where software is installed, what the machine currently has from a hardware perspective. And then we tie that together with your master license agreements that you would get from like Microsoft or Adobe or whichever, manufacturers that you're concerned about that you want to make sure you're compliant with. We'll take that data and we actually do what are called reconciliations. And of course, we do things like create dashboards, which is what you're seeing here. This is just one example of a dashboard in terms of an estate overview. But we've got many different types of dashboards available as well. Maybe we want to look at a SAM or a software asset management dashboard. So here you can look at, cost of unused installs, compliance trending, right? So you can see that your compliance forecasting is kind of going down over time. So we can do different types of forecasting as well, both your true compliance and, of course, forecasting out a little ways based on, past data and those types of things. Of course, compliance percent, end-of-life installs, surplus that you have. Obviously, these are very big numbers because we're talking about, demo data where we've got a lot of information in here, many different types of installs across the board. But these are the types of information and types of dashboards that we can create to make sure that you're compliant from that perspective. Now, one thing I think that really illustrates the insight that you can get from Ivanti License Optimizer is really the data summary. So let me take you in here real quick. And this is really, you can see an immediate ROI from a licensing perspective by utilizing a License Optimizer. Again, it's not just making sure you're compliant. It's also seeing what's installed in the environment, but it's also making sure that you are not over-licensed. I've talked to many individuals over the past 6 months that have been audited 3, 4, 5 times, and it's been some significant either true up costs or potentially even some fines from that perspective, because especially as these manufacturers grow, the license rules get very, very, very complex. I mean, if you're talking about IBM or Oracle or Microsoft, it can be extremely confusing, and trying to make sure you're compliant can be very hard many times. What I'm showing here, this is basically a reconciliation that was done on April 10th across the board. So again, we take that discovery information from SCCM or from our own discovery tools, and then we do a reconciliation against the license agreement or purchase agreement, whatever we're using to determine how many licenses you have against what is actually installed. And again, it's not just, it's hey, if I have it installed, it's a per machine license. It could be per user, it could be per machine, it could be based on the number of processors you have, especially once we start getting into virtualization. It can get extremely complex. So we take that information into account, and we help you do that reconciliation to give you, as an example, a view like this. You'll notice these are all 100%. Well, you're going to start to notice as I start to go down here, now we're starting to get into some issues, right? We're only 78% compliance on Symantec. Microsoft, 72%. So as we start to go down here, you're starting to see now we're starting to see some issues here, right? This is a good way to kind of dive in and see where you have specific issues from a licensing perspective. And typically you may not look at every single vendor in your environment. Maybe you look at Microsoft and Adobe and Oracle and some of those names to kind of get that view into it. But this is a really good way to kind of dive in and see kind of where your problem issues may lie, either from a compliancy perspective, or if you have surplus, right? Like SolarWinds, we've got a massive surplus here, right? But what you can do is you can actually dive in here as well. That was an overview of as a whole from the entire manufacturer. Now we're starting to dive into individual applications, and we're starting to see where we have either surplus, shortfalls, those types of things. And again, as I start to dive down, you're going to start to see a trend here where we're starting to say, okay, we're good on these specific applications, but now as we start to go up, now we're starting to see some issues. We need to dive into this and find out, why we're having these issues. We need to purchase some additional licenses. Maybe we need to free up licenses from other areas and those types of things. So it really gives you a good insight into your effective license position and kind of where you're at from that perspective. I love this tool just simply because the amount of money that you can save from a licensing perspective is huge. I don't think people, let me actually pull up a dashboard again. I don't think a lot of people really understand how much money is actually at stake potentially, or even spent from a software license perspective. It can be huge, right? And I think from an ROI perspective, a total cost of ownership, it's extremely enticing. We've actually got some case studies around that as well, where organizations that have leveraged our solution from this perspective have saved potentially hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars simply by ensuring that they have the correct data. And even if you get audited, you're going to have that data available to give to the auditor to show that, here's the data, I am compliant from that perspective. So whereas, typically organizations are going to be going through spreadsheets, they're going to be trying to gather information from discovery processes and those types of things. So, in my opinion, I think it really sells itself from that perspective. And again, go ahead.
We have a question from Adrian. He wants to know, will License Manager and Optimizer be merged at some point?
With Asset Manager and License Optimizer? I don't know the answer to that at this time. I probably have to get a product manager on the phone. I'm not sure what the roadmap looks like. I could speculate. I don't really want to do that, but yeah, I mean, there is obviously an integration where we're going to be bringing these products together more than likely in the future. Obviously, that's just my opinion. But right now, yeah, they are two separate products from that perspective. I think part of it is because, we have individuals that may not necessarily be interested right now in the software side of it. They really want to track hardware or vice versa. So At this time, though, they are both separate products, but they are both available in the cloud from that perspective. So I can certainly take that.
Okay, we have another question.
Okay.
And he said that's fine. And we have another question from Greg. Greg wants to know, does the system alert you of an upcoming expiration date of a license?
So you could, yeah, you could create either a dashboard that's going to show you, hey, here's my upcoming licenses in the next 30 days, the next 60 days, whatever it is, or you could have it set, send an email. It's not going to pop up a little window like that, but you could have it send an email out, or you could have it. Typically, what I like to do is just have a dashboard similar to this that would show you upcoming, end of life or expirations or whatever it might be, and then you can drill into it from that perspective, right? So in that case, you could do that. You could have an alert from that perspective, or just have it send you an email. I personally like the having the dashboard up, so I always know, as soon as I come into a dashboard that I'm able to actually see that information. Just one other thing that I wanted to mention too is you can actually do entitlements through here as well. So I can set up license entitlements to where I can associate specific licenses to departments or individual users and that type of stuff as well, and track it that way. But anyway, yeah, to answer your question, those are kind of the ways that you would be able to do that. So. Oh, look at that. Expiring entitlements, as a matter of fact. That's kind of what I would be talking about is that type of data. Go ahead.
And we have another question. How does this product integrate with web-based applications such as Office 365 Online?
Yeah, so we can actually download, I'm trying to remember where that's at, but we can actually get that type of information as well. So we can track that cloud data. So, Office 365 or other types of cloud providers where it's really based on the amount of times, the amount of people that are actually accessing that data itself. I'm trying to remember where that's at. I'll have to see if I can remember as we're talking. But we are able to track that type of data as well. We just obviously have to be able to import that data or have a connector to it. And there is an area for that. I'm trying to see. I think it's under configuration. As we're talking, I'll see if I can find that. But we do track that type of data as well from an access perspective and licensing through here.
Another question is Azure connector.
Azure. That is the same type of thing that we were talking about with the Office 365. I'm trying to remember. Let's see, where is it at? I will see if I can find that. That is the same area. From an Azure and an AWS perspective, we track information around kind of the cost perspective. I apologize. I could have sworn I was just looking at that. But we do track that type of information as well. But that's more around how much you're spending, for access and that type of stuff through here. But we do some of that as well. Just trying to remember where that was at. But there's some additional information I can get you guys. We can send it over to Rich to disseminate as well, if that's okay, Rich.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, and if you'll get the information, I'll make sure everybody that attended today gets that information. Not a problem.
Absolutely.
And that wraps up all our questions for today.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will certainly see if I can find that, and I'm sure I will be able to find it, and I'll get that information over to you from an Azure perspective as well as Office 365 on kind of how we track that from that perspective. And if there's any other questions, certainly reach out, and I'll do my best to answer those. If I can't answer them, I will get the information for you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for doing this for us today. It's very much appreciated, and I think that our audience got a lot out of it because we definitely had a lot of chatting going on today. So very active audience. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day as well for joining us. And if you have need any additional information, just reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Email me directly, rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, or chat with our experts online. They'll be happy to chat with you Monday through Friday during normal business hours. Hold on, it looks like we might have one more question that may have just popped in. Yep, here's one more question. Are there some glossies that compare the various products, web versus on-prem?
Web versus on-prem. I'll have to check on that. I don't know they're specifically comparing our cloud products to our on-prem. I mean, they basically work the same. Obviously, the only difference would typically be between who's actually managing the environment, right? Upgrades and that type of stuff would obviously be done for us by Ivanti if it's in the cloud, whereas if it's on-prem, it's going to be controlled by, obviously, the organization where it's installed. Other than that, there's really not many differences, or really any differences to my knowledge. It's really just around, who does the upgrades and the maintenance and that type of stuff from that perspective. But I'll see if I have anything specific. I don't believe I do, but I will certainly look.
Well, Eric, we definitely made you work for it today, so I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much for helping us out and getting this done for us today. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, anytime. No problem at all.
All right, folks, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on our next webinar. We have another one coming up next week, so please join us then. And everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. Should you have any questions, remember 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278, or email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, or visit us on our website and chat with one of our experts. Have a great weekend, folks.